Good morning, everyone. We are
Morning.
live on Tuesday, March 25th. Say hello to Jack Gescheit of the Tree Spirit Project. I'm,
Hi,
Sky-
everyone. Good morning.
I'm Skylar Thomas, an independent filmmaker. And today we're going to be talking about the illegal leases of Point Reyes National Seashore. You know, the ones that all the ranchers always cry and complain about. They're sweetheart deals. It's going to be hard for me not to talk about McClure. We're going to get around to McClure later. I think you wanted to focus on H Ranch or a few like that, or you want to go across the
Yeah, I
myriad.
mean, in our traditional roles of you good cop, me bad cop, for me, I don't need to pick on the individual ranchers. I call out the ranchers by name, and especially since some of them are leaving the park, presumably in the next year, it's
Right.
the entire debacle, to use that word again this morning, of all the ranchers at Point Reyes, as you've always pointed out and ranted about appropriately, are getting incredible lease deals. So as I call them, deals of the century. So I mean, this is a well. Here's I'll introduce it this way. What Skywar's showing now is an ad: 1,000-acre lots, mixed commercial residential use, U.S. taxpayer subsidized, just $2,000 a month. And this is literally oceanfront property in Westmoreland County on the Pacific Ocean, 1,000 acres with anywhere between 5 and 8,000 square feet of residential buildings you can live in and also illegally sublet because no one's going to stop you at the Park Service. And these are the deals for $2,000 a month. You can't get a shoebox in San Francisco for that. This is taxpayer subsidized housing for ranchers at Point Reyes National Seashore. This has been going on for decades. That's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome your comments, folks, for those listening in.
Can
Top
you
of the
tell?
morning to you, Paula. Top of the morning, Paula. She's here.
Oh, here, let me pull the.
One of our fans. That's great. Thank you, Paula.
By the way, everyone, you see two links that I've put up here, and this one is to Peer and one is to the full PDF that Peer refers to. Jack, tell us, what is Peer?
Yeah, very good. I was just going to say I had to learn what they were too. So that stands for Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. It's an independent public watchdog group, and they research topics and put out to the public. And on their website, which is PEER, which stands for Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, peer.org is their website. So everything we're saying, we pulled off. Well, it's verified by Peer. We got it from other sources as well, from the Park Service itself and from our attorney consultant, a retired Park Service attorney, Jim Cota, who's a font of information. And Peer issued a report entitled Point Reyes Sweetheart Cattle Leases Are Illegal. And we'll go into a little bit more about that. But illegal, in short, means they're not charging fair market value. They are charging literally pennies, less than 10 cents on the dollar, for Point Reyes ranchers to lease their properties as they have for decades, which means, and those are taxpayer subsidized, federal taxpayers. So Americans are paying to keep these polluting businesses operating at all. Without those subsidies, they would not be able to afford doing business because the whole industry is ridiculously inefficient, as Skylar has gone on appropriately for years, including from his film, The Shame of Point Reyes, which educated me about some of this to begin with years ago.
Where did you get the 1,000-acre lot figure from? Did you just randomly say 1,000, or is it
No,
average?
it was one specific example. I mean, I think there were two. H Ranch, which is a beef ranch just short of Abbott's Lagoon as you're driving north on Tamales Point, or to get to Tamales Point, was one of the examples where they give specifics about the size of the property, how many acres, the square foot of residential buildings, which of course the ranchers call historic buildings that they let decay and don't maintain. The whole thing is so farcical in so many ways. When people know the truth, they will be disgusted. And then, of course, in addition, for these being illegal, by the way, the Park Service is required to charge fair market value. So they don't just give away property. And again, this is the unusual circumstance of Point Reyes Seashore, where there are even these illegal, excuse me, I'll be technically correct, polluting cattle operations in the first place. And this is, as you said before, and it's worth repeating a few times here ad nauseum, this is while the Point Reyes ranchers are going around saying, oh, poor us, we're so hardworking. stewards of the land, which is a lie. They're polluters of the land, and we have such a bad deal. They have the deal of the century, as I call it, in this mock ad I made up. It was so much fun making that because it's just crazy making. I mean, I don't know what people can see that on the small screen here, but included benefits for just $2,000 a month. You know, this is approximately for one of the specific ranches, which I can go into as you want me to. But here, the benefits: free 200 cow grazing rights rather than paying per cow values of, I think it's like $25 per cow per month is typically what you pay for some land somewhere for your hundreds of cows. That's all free. Free unlimited manure dumping. Free unlimited water table draining. Suck out the water from the reservoirs. Free water. Wouldn't that be nice to get, folks, to your own residence, right? Free water and soil contaminating. It's okay. Free on-site landfill dumping. You know how you can't dump in your backyard like an old truck with leaking oil into the ground? Well, they had done it for a while, and some of them were documented by our folks too, including the great Jocelyn Knight.
Hashtag stewards of the land.
Hashtag stewards of the land. And I'm careful whenever I say that. I say sewers on the land. Free, zero property tax. So they don't pay property tax, for Christ's sake. And of course, free repairs and maintenance by the Park Service, if the Park Service does anything at all. But the ranchers certainly don't. I mean, if you drive by and stop and look at those buildings or look with binoculars, they're dilapidated structures. These historic ranchers that the publicity tour tries to convince us are so valuable that we must let them stay there in perpetuity. And of course, no security deposit, no money down. Act now. Come on down, cattle ranchers. The lease deals of the century.
I have some graphics I'm going to show really quick. So here are these historic dairies. It's divided up. You're more able to see the lettering on the right, and then the left is a little bit more artistic and has the names. And I'm going to zoom in here. So I'm going to show some satellite images, and we're going to zoom in on H Ranch, G Ranch, M and L Ranch. So here it is from high above as we're coming down into Point Reyes. Getting a little bit closer, and all of a sudden the idea of green everywhere is going away, and you're starting to see all this ugliness.
Hold on one sec, Skyward, and I really appreciate you doing the research and getting these satellite photographs. But just to underline it for some people who don't know what they're looking at here, because it just looks green to the urbanite's eye. Like, oh, it's wonderful. We have cows instead of condominiums. That's the big argument. Cows, not condos. But where it says Heart's Desire Beach there, kind of on the right side, bottom of the picture, that's forest. Those are trees. And of course, those trees are now on the chopping block for another project, but that's another discussion for another show. Okay. And then far to the left, those are barren areas with very short grass. This is the ranchers Skyward's going to zoom in on along Pierce Point Road now. But just that picture alone, the ranches deforest the land. The cows keep even the coastal scrub and coyote brush and other plants from growing back. They are constantly lawn mowing it down into short grass, which of course are, annual grasses that were brought in for feed from Europe anyway. So they're not native plants if you care about such things. And it's the opposite of carbon sequestration. It is contributing to the climate crisis. And just in that satellite photo alone, if you know what you're looking at, go ahead and then of course look at Historic Ranch there. It's all just basically short grass and bare dirt. It's just destroyed by these ranches, which are stewards of the land, hashtag, as Skyward said. Thank you.
Okay, guys, we've got Historic L Ranch that my mouse is going over here. We've got McClure on the left. I have a lot of footage of McClure. I mean, it's just crazy to drive past. It's so ugly. And let's keep zooming in. Now, we're getting closer to McClure. Now, to what Jack was trying to say, or was saying, but he used the example of the forest Heart's Desire way over to the right. And as we zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, let me show you here. This is Pierce Point Road that you take to get out to the elk reserve. And the only green that you see here is a little bit of native vegetation and natural water sources that McClure, of course, pollutes. All the death over here is what McClure has done to the land with his grazing and with paving and with structures. And this dark spot over here is one of the poop ponds
We can't
for.
see, by the way, Skylar, just as far as me viewing what you're showing the audience, I can't see your mouse moving if you're trying to get people to see it.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
I'll have to work on that. Zoomed in a little bit more here. I mean, McClure Dairy is just a nightmare. I have a little, this is, that's looking at McClure Dairy from the road.
So this is Pierce Point Road, looking west to the Pacific Ocean, looking at what the ranching, the cattle do to the land, these hashtag stewards of the land, sewers in the land. Look at that. Look at that, man. It's just devastated.
I'm going to pause it here. There's a dark mound in the upper right, which is a pile of rubber tires. You can kind of see some of the structures right in the center, and on the left are the loafing barns that look like Star Destroyers. They're so massive. And what improvements, what does this do for the human race? Produces the most inefficient form of food that you could imagine, on the taxpayer's dime.
And there's a great example of turning a cow into a number, into a product, into a thing, into an object to be killed while it's very young. And even if you want to explain what those white boxes are, those calf hutches are, not veal crates, but places where they take a baby cow away from its mom so they can take all the mother's milk, and they stick that thing in a little isolation plastic tank box thing. Just monstrous, in addition to being an ecological nightmare, of course.
And that's the joy of McClure Dairy that everybody cried shut down in 2021, which of course is still operating. It's 2025, and the Point Reyes Light has still not issued an apology or a correction for saying that McClure Dairy shut down. Did it change? It changed a little bit. Got rid of all of the people that lived there unnecessarily. They have enough housing structures there to support 30 families. He has 1,400 acres. For perspective, the entire Marina District of San Francisco is 500 acres. The entire Marina District. One apartment in the Marina District will bring in more rent than McClure's entire 1,400 acres brings in.
For the federal government, who he is paying supposedly some money to, for the privilege of ranching at historic Point Reyes Seashore, right?
McClure was paying $3,500 a month for a facility that could house 30 people, yet all those people were still displaced in 2021 when economics and nature determined that selling the adult cows would be more profitable to the leaseholder than milking the cows at PRNS. And he got a nice price for his dairy cows. He still has beef cows there. He still hasn't left, so he's obviously doing something with the land. My understanding is that now he has other people renting those places. So he's paying $3,500 for 1,400 acres and a bunch of housing structures, and is able to, what I would say, illegally sublet, while we're all supposed to feel bad for farm workers and holding none of these ranchers accountable for unnecessarily displacing and unhousing these people.
And just to underline that, Skylar and I care very much about poor immigrants, illegal or not, who are paid, crap wages. Well, crap wages with no benefits. But the point is, the ranchers are pushing them in front of this freight train of expose of how terrible they are, and saying, oh, look at these poor ranchers whom we have hired and whom we are exploiting. It is the most craven political operative machination. It just drives me nuts because, the poor ranchers. And then, as you say, as soon as the crap hits the fan, well, fire the ranchers, get them out of the way. I'm staying. I want my money. And they're being paid millions to leave for this deal. And they're not going to share any of that money, of course, because, the poor ranchers, even though they've been making money off the backs of these ranchers, of the workers, because they can sublet to them or dock their pay like modern sharecroppers. And that's the illegal part, which is the Park Service is not supposed to house people who don't work either directly for the Park Service, or the ranchers themselves are allowed to live on the land. And it's questionable. It's iffy political, legal territories. I understand it. Like, can they have their workers live there on site versus commute in? But then the ranch workers have their families live with them. And that is clearly not, like, you can't house everybody and just stick lots of people into a national parkland. That's not legal. And then, of course, you asked me yesterday, in preparation for this show today, Skylar, this can't be legal. Like, how do they get away with it? And that's the, $1 million question.
Peer wrote and published that it's illegal.
Yep.
If that's not true, they're going to get in trouble.
They're very responsible, and they're very conservative. Actually, they're not as histrionic as we are about it. We're the ones that are going to bring attention to this very rational, fact-based report issued by Peer at pee.org, folks, and you can look up Point Reyes and find what we're referring to. And Skylar put the links in the chat too.
I did. If it's convenient, I'll put them up again. I want to read some of it, but I just want people to understand that it's the government agency of the Park Service, a federal agency, who are actually being dishonest and being illegal and getting away with it. They don't face any consequences. We're still waiting on FOIA document requests, which they're holding out on to protect the ranchers because of all the damning information inside of them. And once we do get them, they're heavily redacted in order to still protect the ranchers from all the damage the ranchers have done. A question that we can't answer today, we can only speculate on, but I would love to get some lawyers to give us their takes on this, is why the Park Service, who desperately need money, desperately need funding, would continue to give away this land. Now, I've got to read.
Can I respond to that one point, which is, how can they get away with this? Why are they doing it? Why does it seem the Park Service, by all evidence, Park Service has been wildly biased in favor of ranchers? Why? I did ask that of, I don't want to name names without people's permission, but one former lawyer, I asked about this, and he had asked a former Park Service worker high up, like, what's going on here? And both of them said, we really don't know why. We don't know the politics of it. They can kind of make wild speculations, but not even informed speculations. Well, my best guess is because of this person or this policy. They really don't know. It has a lot of people who used to work for the Park Service and who believe in the Park Service really stupefied, nonplussed, just like, what the hell? Why are they doing this? And having said that, the park policy has now changed, and this deal has been cut with the Park Service in on the deal. They were sued by 3 plaintiffs. Nature Conservancy entered the fray, so there's 4 parties with the ranchers there, and everyone has agreed and signed this document saying a lot of these cows and a lot of these ranchers are going to leave. Not all of them, which is what we want and what we're going to keep lobbying for, because it's the right thing to clean these businesses off the land and stop their polluting. But the rules have changed now, and it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, their public stance is now, we're moving cows out. We're freeing the elk, and the ranchers don't want that. So finally, for the first time, they're not completely 100% in bed with all the rancher agenda. Their federal policy has changed, and that's because of activism and people like you and me and many others ranting about this stuff and informing the public.
It's not because of their own free will. It's not because they desire to do the right thing. They've been pushed into this because people finally had enough.
Yes, and Paula actually just put it as well as I could put it. She just said, with a question mark, I would do it with an exclamation point, quote, infiltrated by ag interests. And that's exactly it. It's infiltrated or corrupted, as I say, by ag interests. And I'm going to slow down here and make one really important political point, which I constantly make with my progressive and liberal and lefty friends, which is, sure, the government has its part in this, and they're partially to blame, for sure. But I really want to, as I spoke yesterday about this, I want to focus on the puppeteer, not the puppet. And the puppet is the government being manipulated by the puppeteer, which is private enterprise, big business. In this case, medium-sized businesses worth millions. The ranchers are the ones who have this political influence, and they corrupt the government. And the reason I'm making this important distinction, a vital distinction, is ultimately I want to focus on the root cause, the problem, and that's the businesses, these cattle ranchers. They're the problem at Point Reyes. Because if you just attack the government and dismantle the government, which is what the right will do, political right and what the Trump administration and the Doge bags are doing in Washington right now under felon Musk, then you take out the government entirely, and then it really gets worse, much worse, where the businesses have no stop at all, no checks and balances from the government, which is doing a poor job, but at least they're there. And I want to empower the federal government and get the corruption of big business out. This is the Ralph Nader thing I learned from 1980. I see the eye roll, Schuyler. Thank you for letting me make that little diatribe. Go to it.
Yeah, we'll come back to the Park Service, whether or not they're willingly doing this or not. But there's two categories. We break this into two categories. How, since it's illegal, have they been able to get away with it? Two, why would the Park Service want to when it hurts them? And I'm going to read how badly it hurts them. I'm jumping down. There's so much good stuff in this article, but here's a quote. We estimate that these below market Point Reyes seashore leases cost taxpayers around $3 million every year.
So that's all the ranches at Point Reyes Seashore, collectively what they're not collecting in fair market value rent, correct?
Yes.
$3 million per year.
$3 million. These are the people who say that the economy can't survive without them, who are costing us $3 million every year just in the under market rate that we could be taking from them. We're not even talking about how much they cost us and the damage that they're doing to the land, and all the different support agencies for farmers and ranchers subsidizing in other ways. It's not just the sweetheart deals. I mean, they're basically operating their businesses for free. In fact, we're paying their operation costs. Let me continue. The annual lease revenue is approximately $800,000 short of covering the seashore's estimated costs for administering the leases. These ranchers are costing the seashore more to be there and are still not even bothering to raise the lease prices enough to even cover the administrative costs. Why? Why would they do that? Taxpayers should not be obligated to subsidize these private businesses. They are private businesses, people. This does not go to some charity. This does not go to saving the planet. This does not go to feeding hungry people. This is private profit industries with no overhead, consuming natural resources, abusing animals, polluting the water and the land and the air, so that some rich people can enjoy fancy meat and fancy cheese.
Meaning the consumers purchasing this stuff and propping the business up, even while the Albert Strausses of the world go around saying how wonderful they are and, oh, we're doing such a great job and we're healing the land. It's just complete public relations cattle poop, just complete nonsense. And, it's just the challenge is getting this out to the public so they understand, the theory, the idealistic theory of sunshine. This information out of the public is the best disinfectant for this stuff. It's what we have to keep doing because this continues, and the cattle empire keeps fighting back, striking back against this outing. Oh, Ray's here this morning. Good morning, and of course, I want to welcome Lynn Klein, a new listener. So thanks for digging into the details on this, says Ray. It's a lot of work, but it's helping a lot. You're providing a great service to us taxpayers. Well, thank you, Ray, and so are you for supporting this movement in your ways as well.
Where's Lynn?
Lynn texted me separately. She's a little bit shy as a new listener. She may join the chat at some point, but she's a friend who listened in.
Use a fake name in the chat.
Yeah, use a fake name, Lynn. Come on in and join us. Go for some other clever name.
Call in with an accent.
And Paula says, "Guns, God, and Animal Ag." I grew up with the commercial for Chevy. It was what is it? Chevrolet hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet. It's Guns, God, and Animal Ag now. Oh God. NC. Someone wrote in workers as human shields. This is back to using the ranch. Oh, don't put us out of work because the poor workers. We want to continue exploiting them and making money off of their off of charging them rent that we don't have to pay ourselves. They're actually making money or the allegations are. Now, I don't have this in the peer report, but what the ranchers can do is rent out lots of their spaces to ranch workers and actually turn a profit because they have such cheap lease deals themselves, not paying much into the government in the first place. Crazy.
Yeah, I talked about the entire Marina District in San Francisco being 500 acres and McClure's Ranch by itself being 1,400 acres. Uh, People who don't live in California, I want you to understand that a studio apartment in a not nice part of San Francisco is nearing 3,500. If it's in the Marina District, a studio is probably getting closer to $5,000 a month. And Point Reyes is in Marin County, which has some of the highest real estate values in the country. Like one ranch has been leasing over 1,000 acres with 5 houses and grazing its 280 cattle on those lands for less than $2,000 a month. Moreover, these private businesses pay no property tax, which you said earlier. No property tax. Oh, let's just throw that in there. Jeez.
Yeah.
How many people would like to not pay property tax?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is insane, man. This is absolutely insane. I can't. And what have all the newspapers been coming up with? They've just been flushing onto us or dumping onto us cascades of pity stories about how environmentalists are ousting these poor ranchers that were such stewards of the land. Oh, we're so evil for protecting the taxpayer from leeches. I need something a little bit more aggressive than leech, because a leech only sucks a little bit of blood. Like, well, what's something that leaves you like clinging to life because it's always taking so much blood out of you?
Decapitation, disembowelment.
And I think you said you did a comparative grazing cost. The actual number is $2,760 per month per cow for the rest of California. $7 for Point Reyes Ranchers.
So I just want to, that's really important. I'm going to actually read it. You and I are pulling the same information. I'm just going to repeat what you said in a different way. The grazing provisions for Point Reyes leases charge only about $7 per, I would say per cow. It's technically an AUN, animal unit, which is a calf and a cow. However you want to do it. They're comparing AUMs or animal units to animal units. Point Reyes is charging $7 per cow. If you have 200 cows, it's $7 times 200 cows. And by contrast, the USDA calculates the fair market value for an animal unit in California is $27.60 per cow. So that's what is it? Almost it's more than it's about 3.5 times. So they're getting, a 66%, 65% discount on just the grazing rights for these guys. I mean, in addition to the cheap land, they have cheap grazing rights. So no wonder they don't want to leave, and no wonder they'll lie their pants off in order to stay put and get these incredible deals. Where else can you get the deal of the century but at Point Reyes?
This idea that we can't survive without them is ludicrous to the point of being maddening. We can't afford not to get rid of them.
Exactly. Very good. Someone throws in the word. I won't attribute it to him because he likes to keep a slightly lower profile, but parasite. There's a great word. Parasite. Parasites on the land. Yeah, exactly. It's analogous, actually. I'll make the analogy in the same industry for thousands of cows, millions of cows in California contributing to the climate crisis by, eating grass, and even the grass-fed, free-range, good stuff, which is a tiny percentage of the market anyway. But a cow, whether it's eating grass or grain, is producing about 220 pounds of methane per year. That's about half of what a car produces. So every time you see 2 cows, think there's a car driving around the field there 24/7, right? Not exactly the clean thing we're told it is by the industry PR.
Well, except that methane is incredibly more dangerous than CO2.
Let's talk about that in a moment. I want to compare carbon dioxide and methane. I'm happy to do that. But the analogy I'm making is like with the ranchers here, help us stay and do more help when they are the ones doing the colossal damage, analogous to the overall industry of cattle ranching, right, which is contributing in a major way, one of the primary drivers of greenhouse gas emissions, because methane is so much more heat trapping than carbon dioxide. And what's their solution, their proposed solution? In the Allen Savory method of rotational grazing and holistic management, regenerative ranching, all those BS terms, the solution to the climate crisis cows have caused? More cows.
Mm-hmm.
It's
chop down trees to make room for more cows.
Well, And
and
don't let
other ridiculous reasons.
don't
These forests are looking healthy and lush and housing a wide variety of wildlife. Let's bring that to an end and call it environmental.
this is the bad cop rant-a-fest, but it's rather worthwhile. It's the same, and to mention the trees, we may do a show on this. I'll talk to you about it later, Skylar. Don't tell anybody I'm talking about it right now. But it's the same thing with deforestation. We cut down millions of trees in the world, which heats the climate and creates more wildfire danger. So what's the solution? Cut down more trees, because trees are wildfire danger. So right. It's incredible. I mean, it's just, for those of us who love nature and wild animals and wild lands and find some peace and solace in the natural world, it's heartbreaking and enraging. I mean, it's such a flood of powerful emotions. It's for me what makes me an activist. I just can't sit idly by. Someone yesterday said, "Hey, Jack, you're going to be 65 soon. Why don't you take Social Security and move out of the country, get a cheap rent somewhere, and retire?" And it's like, I thought about it. Well, that's a reasonable suggestion. Just give yourself a rest. And I can't do it in good conscience. I just need to speak out about this stuff because I love Mother Nature.
Well, it's called purpose, Jack. You've found a higher purpose. Most humans live to get a paycheck and die. Maybe be enslaved their entire lives to a mortgage and put their kids through school, and it continues and it continues. You have found some sort of a what I would call a real reason, and that's to help be an actual steward of the planet.
I have some dear friends who are worker bees, and I really don't judge them. I know what's right for me. That's ultimately where I go with this stuff. I got to do. I don't have kids. Other people had a calling to have children, or they're doing a great job raising wonderful kids who are going to contribute. And of course, there's a whole thing about people who have kids and don't. But thanks for that acknowledgement. I do it for my own satisfaction and peace at night. I get all worked up, but I feel like I'm contributing.
Well, purpose is a really important topic for me. I include it in a lot of the films that I've made, different wildlife species, and finding what their purpose is. And you can actually understand what would go wrong if you remove that animal from the equation. Whereas with humans, and I'm sorry, I know some of us are better than others, but removing humans does nothing but improve the situation for Earth and the rest of Earth's inhabitants. And that's where we need to reevaluate what our purpose is. And, like you talked about with blaming trees for fire, when these ranchers are in fact growing annual invasive fire fuel intentionally every year, where once there were fire-resistant planet cooling trees. And all I hear every day when I go out and I rewild and I plant native plants and try and help the habitat surrounding me is the sound of leaf blowers and mowers and chainsaws. We have less vegetation on the planet than ever, yet more vegetation management than ever. We have no idea what we're doing. We just need to exercise control. And everything that we replace that was peaceful and beautiful and green is noisy and emits fumes and enslaves us to this process. I think that's what drives me crazy, is that we're not accomplishing anything. We're supposedly the superior species, and yet we enslave ourselves to working for these lawns that do absolutely nothing. They do absolutely nothing.
Well, it's worse than they do nothing, Skylar.
Well, they hurt.
They do harm. Right, yeah. They do harm. Yeah, which is if it's planting a lawn in your place, you're taking more water than the plants in this area would require. In the West, it's a big deal. In the East, they don't talk about water so much as we do here necessarily. Yeah, it's all a lot these days.
Did you want to talk about this specifically?
Yeah, I looked at this document. I didn't read into it. So this is actually.
You sent me this graphic, so I assumed there was a reason for that one.
It was trying to read into where the Park Service is required to charge the money, but I didn't study it enough to do it on air. Frankly, I mean, that's just the short story. I thought you might, because you were doing really good research. In fact, the last satellite photo you put up, I just want to look at that one more time and just explain to people. I mean, it was.
Let me scroll. let me scroll through them and you tell me when to stop. Here we are looking far away at Point Reyes.
How it looks all green, and now it looks not so green. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. That's it. So this is, he just, Skyward just zoomed in on satellite pictures, which are readily available on Google. And that's the McClure Dairy and L Ranch. And this is kind of the midsection of the northernmost Point Reyes National Seashore. And look at the green patches. And then most notably, look at all the patches, thousands of acres of land that is no longer green, that would be green if the ranchers weren't there. So they are, I got to find a word. It's not deforesting, because this wasn't forest. This was coastal prairie and coastal scrub, lower plants, maybe 6 feet tall and shorter, but all green, evergreen, green year round, sequestered carbon and growing, which is continually doing the job of sequestering more carbon and cleaning the air. And the McClure Dairy, now he's zoomed in on the ranch complex there, these giant buildings and a poop lagoon there, or excuse me, that's probably a drinking pond for the cows, which they poop in, to be more precise. And there's a green patch on the right, and that's actually, that's a gully there where those plants, I don't know if they're native plants, they're probably not, because there's probably so much nitrogen in that water from the cow poop. And it's just a blight. All of that is not green. It's non-greened. It's devegetated by the cattle operations. In this case, it was McClure's Dairy. He's now a beef operation and on the way out. He did take the deal. He will be, disgustingly, but fine, pay the guy. Yeah, denuded. There's a good word. NC, North Carolina. So that is destroyed land because of this cattle business. The one that these guys say they're stewards of the land when there's sewers in the land.
Which brings us to a tempting and yet probably too complicated for one show topic, and that's that maybe this deal should have never. Maybe this deal. Look, if the Nature Conservancy's deal hadn't happened, ranchers were probably pretty screwed in the first place. If you want to take McClure seriously at all, who had to at least change his operations, it's a sign that Earth just can't take this abuse any longer.
So you and I differ on that one point. For what, it doesn't matter. We're just armchair, quarterbacking now. But I think the deal, I'm not thrilled with the deal, but okay, let's move forward. I support the deal. Let's get those cows out. And then we continue our work as environmentalists, teaching people that the thousands of cows that remain are still doing massive damage. And then we have to do the testing because, right now our group is kind of pushing on some of the agencies to get them to do water testing, which is a great effort. Sure, go ahead. But I'm cynical about those efforts. They should be done. You got to dot all your I's and cross all your T's. But we activists have to keep doing what we're doing. You going out there and filming, there's continuing pollution. More water testing showing that, of course, any thousands of cows on the land still, which especially will remain in Golden Gate National Recreation Area, which is adjacent federal lands that the public also owns, completely overrun by cattle. And that's not changing, which is why this deal, that's one shortcoming of this deal. But it will get thousands of cows out of the park. Not all of them, but we need to keep testing and keep showing the public these are polluting operations. And it's educating the public about the big picture about cattle ranching. There's no clean way to do it. The free range regenerative ranching is actually more consumptive of resources, produces more methane, heats the climate faster, folks. So have your Nyman Ranch beef all you want, but you're actually doing more harm to the environment than if you ate the feedlot stuff out of Bakersfield.
And I'll just say this and move on, but for people to be interested in it in the future, the GGRNA lands, about 10,000 acres, because of this deal that was taken, got those new 20-year leases that we got so upset about and should not be taking place and are very harmful. It's extremely bad news and it's extremely damaging. And we need to talk about that because, boy, that's not a small detail in that.
It's a horrific detail. You're absolutely right. And my understanding, the backstory on this, the reason that the deal was struck finally, with these compromises, which inevitably is most deals, was because there was a legitimate fear, whether it's true or not, we don't know, but it was a legitimate fear anyway about what the Trump administration would do. Now, we might end up back there anyway if these ranchers are successful in getting Trump to intervene or try to tank the deal. But it really is progress because all the parties signed it. It's a legal contract. And as Jim Cota, the retired Park Service attorney, taught me, Can it be undone? Well, theoretically, but it's not easy. It is a legal contract. And it's not just something that the National Park Service under the Department of Interior under Trump ultimately now can just say, I just remove all that. It's not how it works. It can't be done that way. Now, of course, they're capable of doing anything and trying anything, but the courts are in the way, and it's going to take time to unravel all that. And even if they did, then we're back to the litigation, which is, you're making the legitimate point. It's a pretty strong case by the litigants against the Park Service for this horrible mismanagement with these cows. So they might not win anyway. And he made the very salient point. If that were to happen, if the deal were to be scuttled and it goes back to litigation, the Park Service, or I should say the litigants, Resource Renewal District, Center for Biological Diversity, Western Watersheds Project, have a very strong case and could still go ahead and win. And even while that goes on over the course of a long legal process, another year or 2 or 3, the ranchers have to pay for that. And we're going to keep pounding away with the truth.
What?
They have to pay legal fees. They have to hang in there.
Stop it. The taxpayers pay their legal fees. Marin County paid their legal fees last time.
Well, I would say the Cattlemen's Association will pitch in money too. But the point is, it has been.
That's not going to hurt them. That's my point. The legal fees aren't going to hurt them.
The reason they took the deal, my friend, is because they just don't like this anymore, which is, it used to be a sweet deal where they were there and nobody bothered them. And now they're very much in the spotlight with you and me ranting and a lot of other people now ranting about how ridiculous this is with their pollution, climate crisis, not contributing much to the marine economy and doing great harm. And that's just, it's no longer the fun little easy scam deal they had. They're being outed.
And yet they've made some progress, because this has kind of been a big PR move for them. It's actually worked out great for them. Kind of like Trump, no press is bad press. This deal, in which they're getting millions of dollars, has actually portrayed them as victims being ousted, and we're losing very important people. And it's made a lot of people more aware of the ranchers. And maybe this is actually going to put them in a better situation to fight the future fighting. I don't know. It's interesting. They're not paying anything. You can understand why they wouldn't want to leave. They have oceanfront property that they aren't paying for, people.
Yeah.
So it's not a mystery of why they don't want to leave. On the other hand, they're being offered millions of dollars for the second time. I joked about this in the Shame of Point Reyes. I was like, worst case scenario, pay these thieves again. We're doing it. And we're still not getting rid of them. It's incredible.
No argument. Yep. What you said. And for those who haven't, Shame of Point Reyes is Skywar's film that educated me and a lot of other activists to get involved in this debacle, this joke, this farce. Whew.
Read your advertisement here again.
Let me, I've got it bigger on my screen so you should read. Yeah. So this is Cattle Rancher Lease Deals of the Century. And the leasing agent is the National Park Service. Yes, folks, 1,000-acre lots, mixed commercial residential use. U.S. taxpayer subsidized, just $2,000 a month for 1,000 acres of oceanfront property in desirable West Marin County, California, just north of San Francisco. And that includes lots of benefits. Free 200-cow grazing rights, free unlimited manure dumping, free unlimited water table draining. Water and soil contaminating? Okay, not a problem. Free on-site landfill dumping. I feel like George Carlin, but not as funny. Zero property tax liability. Rent the place, don't pay any tax. We'll cover it all. And of course, free repairs and maintenance by your friends, the National Park Service, in the business of supporting destructive industries inside our national parks. No security deposit? No problem. No money down? No problem. Taxpayer subsidized. All cattle ranchers are pre-approved.
I'm gonna bunch a couple of different numbers together. Okay, these sweetheart deals are costing taxpayers $3 million a year. Now, also consider that these are purely commercial operations that serve no park purpose. While Point Reyes National Seashore draws well over 2 million visitors each year, barbed wire fences restrict park visitors from entering the leased dairy and ranch lands. Why you would want to go through those, I don't know, but it's a huge part of the park.
That's the 100 miles, just to be clear, that's the 100 miles, it's actually about 300 miles of mixed barbed wire and straight wire fencing that surround the cattle ranches, that keep the cows in and keep the public that owns the land out.
Speaking of legality, I've always wondered why it's fine for ranchers to leave behind their mess everywhere they've ever been. Any land that's ever been bought from historic ranching has barbed wire all over it. All over it. I'm always running into barbed wire. Here's one time when it'll finally come down, when the land sells again and developers develop on top of it.
You know, I've always kind of wondered, I'm just thinking out loud now, which is a dangerous thing to do. Why is it barbed wire rather than straight wire? Cows are not, busting to get out. And I actually, as I say this, I think barbed wire serves more than to keep the cows in. I think it's to keep people out. Rusty barbed wire is not something you want to mess with. And it stops the public from accessing their own public lands that the ranchers want you to think is their land.
It's basically the same thing that we used to hurt other human beings in World War I.
Right. The rolls of wire out on the battlefield, you mean?
Yeah, maybe we just had a lot of extra barbed wire from hurting humans, and we said, "Fuck it, let's hurt animals with it."
Yeah, I mean, again, it's funny, to your point earlier about what we're doing to nature, the big picture. For me, it's a war on nature. All the or so much of the restoration work. I mean, the restoration is a legitimate thing, but the word has been co-opted by the industry now. And always, here's the litmus test, folks. When whatever someone is prescribing to do on the land, whether it's a industry or whether it's the government or whether it's your neighbor who means well, if it involves killing wild plants and animals, which is to say plants and animals that live in the wild, that are not domesticated pets or animals abused for profit, if they're killing plants or animals, that's the problem. That's the war on nature. That's what management is these days. Management always involves killing. And that could be with pesticides, with herbicides, with chainsaws cutting down trees. It's always killing, killing, killing. That's what humans do so well. We are the apex killer species on the planet.
And it's not.
Go ahead, Scott.
It's not fulfilling.
Well, there's no end to it. It's a bottomless pit. It's like trying to find love with, pornography or food or cigarettes. You just keep sucking at it, and you're still empty inside. Like, oh, I don't know, the whites only house now is these days. There's no end to it. You just or Felon Musk bouncing around like, fill me, give me the love I never got in the cafeteria as a kid, as I like to say. And it's just, there's never enough. You could, I don't know, I'll make this up. You could be, let's say, the richest person on the entire planet, have more wealth on paper than anybody else, and you still want more money. It's not enough. You want to plunder the money of poor people to become even richer, because then finally what? You'll be happy? It's a bottomless pit. It's an empty yearning and longing. That person doesn't even understand why they're yearning and longing for what they're getting at, which will never satisfy them, which is, profound surprise, lack of love.
It also reminds me of hunting. It's not like these hunters ever kill the right number of animals that fulfills them. They either have an epiphany and they're like, Jesus, what I'm doing is wrong, or they just keep on killing forever. And we talked about how there's only 4% of mammal mass on the planet is wild.
Correct.
I see hunters everywhere. How can there be any wildlife left? Like, forget the ranchers and forget wildlife services and the millions that they kill. Then you have all of these citizens. There are 8 billion people. Let's say that 4 billion of them like to kill things. We only have 4% for them to be going and picking off.
Yep. Yeah. So the number is 43660 is how I remember it. For some reason, it sticks in my mind. 4% biomass. And I think it's terrestrial animals, opposed to, few mammals in the ocean. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, actually. But I know that it's biomass. This is a study done by, it was reported in The Guardian. It was a legitimate news source. But 4% of the biomass on Earth nowadays is wild animals. 36% of humans, of the biomass is human beings. And 60% is domesticated animals, livestock. Obviously, a lot of that weight is going to be cows, and then pigs, and then there's a huge number of chickens. They're much smaller and lighter, but we're eating them in larger numbers as some people quit so-called red meat to eat the other meat. And all of it is monstrous, well, both ethically, of course, how the animals are tortured, and then for the environment. Karen Lease, welcome, Karen, has joined us and writes, barbed wire is near the top of my list of horrible human inventions, but it's a very long list. Yeah, and Paula says, I'll never understand hunting. You know what? I do understand hunting. I really do. And even I would say I'll be a little bit more understanding here. There is something ancient in our species that used to hunt animals to survive. It used to be necessary. And I think for many hunters, it's their, I mean, it's so tragic, but it is a yearning to reconnect with nature and to go out and, wear your camo gear and have your rifle, or your mostly rifle, not bow and arrow, because that's too challenging. You have to learn a skill, and hide and be quiet in nature. I mean, it's the same thing I do with a camera, right? But I'm not shooting to kill. I'm shooting to capture and photograph, not literally capture. And it's that yearning to reconnect with nature. But then the tragedy is, and how do they reconnect? By killing an animal, which is no longer necessary. And as Sky was saying, because there's so many humans, as we were saying, there's so many humans. If people want to go hunting, you'll basically destroy what few species are left. And it's mostly what deer, I guess, is one of the few animals, the few animals that can survive humans being around. Whereas we've, mostly exterminated all the big, large predator animals that we fear because we're so disconnected from nature.
I go out and I get a rush when I see that there is a wild animal there, particularly a predator. I don't know why that is. I don't know why we think, maybe it's not all of us. Maybe it was a boy thing, but I always thought that things with teeth were cool when I was a kid. Unfortunately, we're reduced to coyotes. But when I look up and there's a coyote watching me, that's pretty cool. And sometimes I've tried to track them and watch what they do. Oh, I'm acting like a hunter. Thing is, just keep observing. I don't understand the joy of bringing that thing that you're enjoying to an end, especially when we hardly have any of it left. And then you turn around and you just label a coyote a pest because it still exists where we've destroyed everything. How dare they?
You could even say, I'll just pull a random quote out of the air, carrying lease. Earth is hell for animals. Oh, and here we go. And thank you actually for doing Paula brings in the masculine. I was going to bring about masculine, feminine energies and what our culture, how we're taught to be hyper masculine. Paula writes, and to be a man or a particularly clueless woman, meaning a woman who would kill, which is, I would say, what I was taught being in Marin now for decades is all people of whatever gender you are have masculine and feminine energy in them. And, these are labels. Of course, there's no such actual literal thing. It's all metaphorical and metaphysical, if you will. But I was taught as a kid, I had a BB gun, right? And then I had a pellet gun. And then I got a 22. And I was like, this was my way of connecting with nature. And my father didn't know any better. He was a relatively gentle guy and he wasn't a hunter, but we had guns. And I would circle ponds and look at things to shoot at, which meant frogs and fish. Yeah. And it was, it's just, I'm not so much ashamed. It's just kind of like fascinated and aghast that I was a kid who always loved nature and would study insects. But then if you don't have an adult who's teaching you, like, no, little Jackie, that animal's alive. Don't torture it. There's no need to do that. It's a beautiful living thing. And that's a more, I would call it a feminine approach to nature, to understanding the life force in that animal. In the plants is the same as the life force in us, and we're intimately connected.
Well, we've turned this into the vegan therapy show again, but
I don't know what the V word has to do. I have no idea what you're talking about, buddy. You just go bringing the V word into it again. I'm not going to the Star Vega to be a vegan. I'm just talking about what you were saying, which is I look at animals and go, wow, what a beautiful animal. And I'm in joy and I'm fulfilled the way Elon Musk is trying to fill himself up with making more money and screwing more poor people out of their Social Security.
Well, it's actually really disrespectful if I were to compare my childhood to your experience of you're basically just switching from using a can or a target to like, maybe I'd like something that's living, a little bit more entertaining or challenging for me.
Yep.
You're not accomplishing anything. You're just entertaining yourself at the cost of another living creature.
Well, I would say, the extreme example I think of, we seem to have wandered from the topic, I guess it's okay, of cheap ranch deals and into the general, but I think of Donald Trump Jr., who's one of these, idiot kids, spoiled, and he goes out and, to kill big animals. And it's a domination. It's like an addiction. In the moment of dealing with something that's big and powerful, bigger than you, that you can kill, you can end its life, you have control over that, you feel power again. And I was taught something I'll never forget by a teacher. He used the terms authentic power and inauthentic power. And inauthentic power was his definition for when you control another person and that can be a man raping a woman, the classic example, I'm going to dominate and control her, you're actually not, it's not authentic power, which is a joy that comes from within and is nothing about dominance. It's the opposite of dominance of another person or animal or living thing. It's a joy of connecting with another living thing, or even just, meditating in a cave, if you will, and being completely divorced from everything and yet connected to everything from within. And now I'm going, Marin County woo-woo, which is part of me now. But
Well,
that's an authentic power. It's what I feel when I'm on a mission, a self-appointed mission, and, thinking I'm actually helping and connecting with an animal by speaking out on its behalf. I feel empowered, but I'm not doing any harm.
the crazy thing is, you said divorced from nature, and these people who are reconnecting with nature by killing things are still divorced from nature in that process. Like the fact that you don't spend any time out there has nothing to do with your life, except for when you go out there to do harm, and you're taking some big old truck out there to do it. And then maybe you get on an ATV while you're out there, and you've got some big old boots that protect your feet because you don't have any business out there, and you would never be able to survive out there without hurting yourself. And then you have to arm yourself with camouflage and weapons because you don't have any actual physical means by which to accomplish what you're going to try to accomplish. And I'm sure you packed a lunch and have a bunch of food waiting for you at home. This has nothing to do with connecting with nature. It's people who have no sense of purpose, and somewhere in their past or in their present, someone told them, well, here, try and find a sense of purpose by doing what some people way back in history did.
Yeah, well, it's Paula says shortcut to manhood, and I would say it's shortcut to what our American culture, I can't speak for other cultures, teaches us as manhood. It's power and strength, and they don't use the word domination, but their idea of the cultures, our normal American way of, you get a big truck, you get a cyber truck, it's really big, and you dominate and scare other people. It's inauthentic power. It's feeling powerful by putting your foot on the neck of somebody you've knocked to the ground, as opposed to real power is feeling powerful and alive, and I would say joyous, without having to dominate another person. In fact, there's, great power. It's a more feminine approach, I suppose, in the joy of connecting with another living creature. Like you were saying, is just go out, and you feel like saying to a hunter, put your gun down and just go out and just try to get close to an animal with nothing in your hands. You're not protected. You're not going to do it any harm. You're just trying to get close. And really, it's the way, actually, I have read a wonderful story about there were Native American tribes who, of course, needed to kill animals to survive, a very different time. And this is romanticized and idealized. And, Native Americans were people, good and bad in all sorts of ways, just like today. But many of them did live on the land, and they weren't agricultural yet, and they were hunter-gatherers, and they would spend days in the hunt, where they would wear the skins of an animal, take on the scent of an animal, and be with the animals and close to them. And that, I do accept the notion of it being a sacred rite where you do honor an animal, even as you take its life. But that is now such an idealized, romanticized version of what hunting is compared to what's actually done, even by modern, I'm going to go there, even by modern Native Americans who, get a pickup truck and a gun and shoot something with a scope. I don't care that you're Native American. That's just nonsense. That's nothing to do about reconnecting with nature. That's getting some cheap meat for your fridge because, Whitey took your land and screwed your people. I get that. How's that for wandering into a fun place to go, Skylar?
Yeah. Well, I've got a response. It would be a whole show.
Right. Well, we could do another show on that. It'd be fun to get people pissed off. No worries, Sledge. Glad to have you join us.
Oh, don't worry, Sledge. All you missed was Jack ripping on your favorite people.
Oh, yeah. We have a hunting show with Sledge. He's Sledge. I was talking about you the other day. You're this cool guy who has very different politics than me, but you and I intersect in a lot of ways, and you've got a sense of humor. So, God bless you.
You should watch the show, though, Sledge, because I think you'll be a little bit blown away by these leases.
Yeah.
Were actually what the topic of the show was today. It was not about hunting.
Yeah. Well, I could argue that the ranchers do more harm to wildlife than hunters do, because, of course, with the satellite photos you showed in the show earlier of a denuded land, this is placed thousands and thousands of acres, about, 18,000 acres of the park and another 10,000 acres of the adjacent GGNRA land is basically devoid of wildlife. There are one coyote, maybe a badger somewhere, but basically all the animals have been driven off because the land is denuded. Yeah. And right now in March, March, this time of year right now, it's March 25th. People go to Point Reyes and go, wow, look how beautiful green it is. That's how they can't see what's right in front of their face, which is, as you called it, a monoculture golf course, moonscape. Oh, Sledge, I'm not going to go there. And I do, Karen is, and God gave man dominion. There you go, over all these things. Well, I would say you're supposed to use a large G God, and I don't believe in that old man and the white man in the sky telling us what to do and watching out for us and then punishing us if we do something wrong. That's not my notion of how things work. So I don't buy the dominion argument that was written by some men who wanted dominion over other men.
And how many versions of the Bible are there?
Exactly. And how many different religious texts of different denominations, maybe arguably served a purpose back when, but not needed anymore. Thank you.
Well, the idea that God created all of these things, because the Bible does talk about, God spent the time and cares for these creatures and blah, 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 blah. And then we turn around and interpret a different part of it as he created all these things that he cares about for us to destroy. Right. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
It's funny. Sledge reminds me he's in Montana. He said, it's Montana. Sorry. It's like Montana still has enough space in it where people can kind of live the fantasy of, well, it used to be, which is like, look, I got 100 acres. My neighbors have 100 acres. I can go out and shoot stuff and I'm not killing it all because there aren't enough people doing this bad behavior at this point. But I mean, that's why Californians in crowded areas that are expensive run off to Montana and Wyoming and places and, get their 100 acres and a deer rifle, to live a different life again, trying to go back in time. Oh, Karen, I didn't capitalize that for a reason. Well, of course, God is small g for you and me, perhaps. But when you talk about gave dominion over these things, that's the capital G God, right? You should join us sometime. We'll talk about that on another show. Join us live and join the chat. We're 10 o'clock, Skylar, so we can wrap up anytime you feel like. And I do. Do you want to do this publicly or privately after we end here today? I'm going to talk to you about possibly doing a show on the current deforestation mania, which is more management, more controlling and killing nature by cutting down trees by saying they're fire dangerous. Is that something you would want to do, or we'll talk about it?
Oh, we can. It's if anyone's ever actually watched my channel, it'll be redundant. Like I talk about it on this channel and the ecology channel. I've had George Werthner on several times. The bottom line is it doesn't make sense. It's about fire conditions, not fire fuel. And humans just keep trying to control things. Like they're targeting elk in Montana. Wildlife are causing problems. Trees are causing problems. All the good things that God created are causing problems. But there's always room for more humans, more invasive fire fuel, weeds, and more livestock. And yet we don't understand why things are getting worse. Maybe you should stop chopping down the fucking trees that were keeping the planet cool in the first place. It's that simple.
And it wouldn't be a Skyjack without Jack mentioning capitalism, which fuels it. It's why agencies and, of course, private companies that corrupt agencies want to cut things down because there's money in that. There's an entire industry, ironically, or Orwellian, I guess, named with an Orwellian name called biofuels. Oh, the biofuels industry. It sounds good. It's fuel that's biological. No, it's cutting down trees and burning it. Right. Cutting down forests and burning all the wood. That's a biofuel, one of several. It's again, Orwell lives. I'm just finishing up my 1984 reread, which I've been doing slowly because it's so challenging and fascinating to read. But it's all right there. You call things the opposite of what they are to sell them to the public. And if the public is dumbed down, you close the Department of Education and people watch the news on Instagram, they can be convinced of anything. That we've always been at war with Oceania and we've always been allied with Eurasia. And then the next day it just switches because there's no deep understanding of anything that's going on because you're so dumbed down by.
If people would just spend more time outside, maybe they would think differently about it. Because I personally depend on trees for shade, like depend on them, and it's gotten so hot that I've been under the shade of a tree and felt bad for the tree. I was like, thank you for taking that punishment. And listen, it's gotten so bad that trees are having their leaves singed while attached to the tree. There's no more waiting for fall for the leaves to turn brown and drop to the ground. They're being burnt while the tree is alive. And people are responding to that by getting rid of trees.
Right.
That's as freaking stupid as it gets.
Yeah, well, it's the again, cutting down trees to save us from climate crisis is like prescribing more cows to solve the climate heating caused by cows. Throwing a proverbial gasoline on the fire.
I am part tree, says Karen.
Oh, Karen, do you know who I am and who you're chatting to? Tree Spirit Project. I lead in the fall. I lead a trip to go spend time in redwood trees and just get people away from their jobs, out of their cars, out of their homes, offline. They have if you want a phone as a camera, that's fine, but disconnected from the web and everybody else, and spend a lot of time with a group of people who know to be quiet, even silent, in giant redwood forests of Northern California. I don't know where you are, but
I was about to say it would be interesting for you and I to do this forest health episode from inside the area that they're about to destroy. But then we would be kind of noisy and bringing technology into there.
how would you you mean from Tamaulipas Bay State Park Forest or anywhere?
Yeah. We'd sit amongst the trees and look at the health of it while talking about this need to destroy that health.
We'll talk about that. I've toyed with doing that, where instead of doing podcasts and talking about nature while indoors cut off from it, be in nature. The trouble is, when I go into nature, I'm a talker, obviously, but I get really quiet and I don't want to talk. My ex and I had wonderful forest walks. I missed that about her, where we would just be really quiet in nature and silent. And silent doesn't work as media, hyped up, high energy and movement and all that is what people want when they tune into these shows. And if you just say, oh, I'm peaceful and quiet and join me, it's like, for me, that's boring TV. You miss something when you're not actually in the forest yourself. So it's tricky.
Karen says she's hung out with you in the forest. Maybe you didn't recognize him with his clothes on.
You always go there, Skylar. You're so put off with the nudity. It's nothing to do. You can be a tree hugger like I am, extraordinaire, unrepentant, and keep your clothes on the whole time, buddy. But you want to see me naked, I understand. We can go there another show.
We are concerned about the Alaska wilderness. Yeah, no shit. Oh, yeah, another show that we should have a sledge call in for. Why are nature lovers so supportive of ending nature?
Karen, you know what? I guess it's early onset dementia. She says, I went there with you, Jack. Like, so I know you, Karen, and like, oh yeah, oh, that's right. That's you. I've known you for 20 years.
That was the purpose of my joke.
I'm sorry?
That was the purpose of my joke. She said she knew you.
I don't recognize the name, and
because you were naked.
Well, maybe so. I was so in the moment, I had no memory.
Names don't matter that much when you're naked, right?
Set aside the naked, focus on the trees. Trees. It's not about you can be a tree hugger without being naked. And of course, the pictures are better when you're naked for all sorts of artistic reasons. But that's
I'm gonna end this by walking people through these photos.
Okay.
Jack, do you want to read how much these people are paying, or I'll just show the photos? But all right, here are those sweetheart deals in Point Reyes National Seashore. That is the Point Reyes peninsula there that you can see. Now I'm zooming in. Now here's a satellite version. Zooming in, you see the death and the brown starting to get more prevalent, even more prevalent.
More brown, less green.
There's a zoom in of McClure Ranch, and even more of a zoom in of McClure Ranch, and some video footage of McClure Ranch.
Look at that. Look. Organic, small, local, historic, hardworking dairy farmer. Look at the land. Look at what they're these beautiful innocent cows are just being exploited, abused, and killed when they're mere children in adolescence. It's not their fault, but look at what the cattle business, the cow industry, does to the land. And
imagine that's what ranchers did with 1,400 acres. You turned 1,400 acres of habitat into this, and you have the nerve to call them stewards of the land.
Oh, I didn't tell you, Skylar, because it was so disappointing and upsetting. But I showed this picture and some footage at the same property, actually, McClure's Eye Ranch in Point Reyes, on a screen to a room full of 70 or 80 people at the Marin Coalition, and said just what we're saying. And there was some ranchers there that day, and a lot of environmentalists from Marin County, who aren't directly in the business, but of course they eat meat and dairy, I'm sure. The old guard, vegetarian types who don't want to shift into like, oh, I understand the dairy is actually worse for the environment and worse for the animals. And I showed that picture. And it was for me like, this is the come to Jesus picture. Like, look at the land. This is the best of the best. Organic, small, local dairies. Look at what they do to the land. Shouldn't this end the conversation? And it's just, deflect your shields up, Captain. No response. I mean, no audible response. Who knows what they were actually thinking? And there was not an opportunity with the forum and the format. Jim Coda spoke, I spoke, Eric Mulvar spoke, and then there was a rancher woman there. It's a longer conversation we'll have, but it was both fascinating and also depressing because it just wasn't the right format to say. I wanted to do a Q&A, like, hello, anybody. Does anybody have any question about what they're seeing? Does everybody understand this is destroyed land? Raise your hand. If you don't understand it's destroying land and have a counter argument, please say it out loud if you would. And actually force a conversation about that picture. I mean, in your film, Shame of Point Reyes, it's what, for me, the light bulb went off when I saw you showing the land and saying this is destroyed and there's thousands of cows and very few elk. I'm like, the light bulb went off and I was, oh my, it was, aha, I had no idea. I drove through that park like most people do, seeing elk and cows and not knowing what was going on. So it kind of amazes me that people don't get it. And ranchers, of course, are never going to get it because they would quit their businesses and be ashamed if they did. I understand why they're resistant, but the average person, what do you lose? You grab oat milk instead of dairy milk. Like, what's the big deal?
Oh,
by the way, Slide, it's sad. To quote Slide, it's sad.
I didn't find the video in time for today's show. I was searching, but I've actually timed. I set up the camera and began filming as you go past McClure Ranch. It takes 5 minutes going 20 miles an hour for it to no longer be directly on your left. 5 minutes. You can't hold your breath and get past how big the place is that he is renting for $2,000 a month. And that's the picture I want people to think about when you understand exactly how much the ranchers are stealing from you, costing the taxpayers $3 million a year just in administrative costs. Just in administrative costs alone.
And a great summary line right here by Paul again. God bless you. Small g, mass delusion via marketing. That's as compact in 4 words as I could say. Mass delusion via marketing.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jack. We'll be back next week.
Thank you, Skylar. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Appreciate it. Please share this podcast, which will be a recording on Skylar's YouTube channel, Watching Humans. Thanks, everyone. See you next Tuesday.
By the way, if you're having trouble being notified, you've got to do the subscribe. You've got to click the notification bell, all kinds of stuff. Otherwise, YouTube will hide it from you.
So please subscribe to Skylar's station and support him. And regardless, we're always here, come hell and high water.